So, welcome everyone to the first episode of the High Performing Woman Talkshow, where we celebrate the unstoppable force of high achieving women. So, I'd like you to join me as I showcase remarkable stories, insights, and triumphs of extraordinary women who break barriers, inspire change, and redefine success. So, get ready to be inspired, motivated, and empowered. And with that, I would like to introduce you to our first guest. And that is Dr. Sandra Kaufmann. And she is the national head of anesthesia for children. I'm trying to get that right. I've been practicing that introduction. And also the author of the Kaufmann Protocol. So, Sandra.
Yes.
You are a children's anesthesiologist, a best-selling author, an entrepreneur. I mean, really the definition of high performing. So tell me a little bit about the person, Sandra Kaufmann. What is it that people don't know about you?
Oh gosh, that you never really feel like you're a high performer. And so you're sort of forced to do more and more and more. And then you end up with this plate that has far too much on it. And then as soon as someone suggests something even more interesting to do, you heap it right on. And then at some point, there is so much stuff on your plate that that's just who you are and you can't not do it. I think that's who I am.
And tell me a little bit about the background that you have here with these instruments.
Oh gosh. So, well, my daughter's a musician. I am not. I tried to be as a kid and I failed mercilessly. But I'm running from place to place.
Oh, so good. You failed at something.
I failed. Well, so my mother was a musician and she said everyone plays an instrument and everyone plays a sport. As a consequence of that, I played the trumpet and I was a basketball player. I was much better at athletics than playing the instrument, so that kind of fell by the wayside. So I sort of became a non-pro athlete. My whole life I've been running and swimming and biking and rock climbing and hiking.
Yes. Now tell me about the rock climbing, because that's not something that everyone just rolls out as a sport that they do.
Yeah, so it's amazingly crazy and kind of fun. So if you grew up climbing trees, like this is for you. It's fun. I started 20 some years ago. And you start on basically most people, unless you live in Colorado, start in gyms. And you climb things, right? And it's coordination, it's yoga, it's strength, it's full body conditioning. And then you go on trips around the globe and climb just incredible rocks. I mean, just insanely.
So like this to me is a little bit of an oxymoron. Someone who's into longevity, but also does rock climbing.
Well, no. So yeah, it does sound a little goofy, right? But the idea of longevity is not just longevity. Like there's people that obsess, like they won't do anything unless like it is absolute longevity. Like Brian Johnson, like AI tells him every day to do exactly what he's going to do. But my idea of longevity is take the extra time that you have and the extra health that you have to do whatever the heck you want to do with it.
Do what you love, right?
Which I love. So not only am I a rock climber where you go sort of like, straight up a wall. I'm not a free climber. I'm not a solo climber. I'm not going to fall off and die. Half-life of those guys is very short. I use ropes and harnesses and all that kind of good stuff.
Okay. Phew.
Yeah. But that sort of led me into like big mountain climbing. So I've been to Everest Base Camp and I've hiked ice fields. I've hiked Aconcagua. I'm going to hike mountains in Ecuador in January because you can. Because I mean, I'm middle-aged, but I feel like a teenager because of my silly protocols. And if life says go climb something, you should because it's fun and it's just adventurous.
That's brilliant. So I wanted to, before we get into a little bit about your protocols, your silly protocols, how dare you? Shame on you. What I wanted to do is ask you what is your definition of what it is to be a high performing woman? Because you just a little bit at the start kind of went into overwhelm, but I'd like to positively state this. Like, what is it for you to be a high performing woman?
I think, well, it's funny. I don't like to actually separate it's like being a woman versus a man. Like we're people.
Yeah.
And granted, there's the balance, right, of being a mother and a family person and all of that. But the idea, I think, is to just immerse yourself in the challenges that you enjoy. And when you find niches that you're successful in, you just keep pushing. Um, and I have this goofy phrase that my kids make fun of me all the time. And it's like, what could possibly go wrong? Right. So I have done innumerable things, and people look at me like, you're nuts. And I go, what could possibly go wrong? And as it turns out, generally things don't go wrong, right? So, I'm going to write a book. What could possibly go wrong? Well, it could fail miserably, but it didn't, right? It was successful. So I did that, and I started, speaking at conferences and doing this and doing that, and it's fun and it's challenging. And then when they offered me, I don't know, 15 years ago or so, the position to be the chief of anesthesia, I'm like, well, why not, right? And so I did it. And I probably didn't know what I was doing when I started. And then 15 years later, well, all of a sudden now I'm the national expert, because you take things on, you digest them, and you do the best that you can, and then you just keep going. And I don't think we ever aim to be a high performing woman. I think it's just who we are. And it's a path to
Like
sort
an
of
iterative, saying
self-fulfillment.
yes to these opportunities, taking on the challenge, and then the next and the next. It's like a gradual thing.
I believe that to be true. And it may not be true for other folks, but that's sort of what it turned out to be for me.
Right. So, you've obviously achieved a lot in life so far. What would you say? What has been one of your biggest setbacks or challenges, and how did you overcome it?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. I hate to say this, but I think it's kind of true. I think sexism is a huge deal. When I was younger, one of my big goals was to be a neurosurgeon. And I spent a year being a general surgeon at one of the highest ranked residencies. And I switched out of that to be a neurosurgeon. And it was just incredibly sexist. This was 25 years ago. There were no rules. I had professors start phrases with, well, I know you're a woman, but. And it was really, really, really challenging, right? And you had to sit there and take it, because there was no way to fight back at the time. But I think it taught me how to swallow my pride and just plow through it and work as hard as I possibly could, because in the medical field, you just had to be better if you were a woman. But I think you sort of ended up proving yourself, or proving myself, as best as I possibly could under the circumstances. And I ended up leaving neurosurgery because I thought, this is ridiculous, and the outcomes were terrible, which is how I became an anesthesiologist. But it taught me to be tough. I'll tell you that.
In what way?
Because men stare at you like you're an idiot, and you have to defend yourself politely. Because if you're, there's a fine line, right? If you're sort of an uptight woman, you're a bitch, right? So you have to be pleasantly stern. You have to be polite. There's just a line, and I learned that line of being in charge, having power, being authoritative without the negative connotations that powerful women sometimes have. And I think that was a huge battle. And I bet a lot of folks have actually gone through that same learning process.
That kind of leads me on to my next question. What strategies or habits have been essential to you in achieving your success in life so far? So you kind of, you just mentioned finding that balance of, it's a kind of executive presence, we would call it in the corporate world, right?
Yeah, probably.
So what are some of the strategies or habits, this could be in the workplace or outside of it, that are really underpinning your success right now?
That's a good question. And I guess it depends on which area we're looking at. As a physician and as a leader, I think it's a different skill set than as a longevity physician in trying to start a business. I think that what has happened is you evolve a personality where you are friendly and you're approachable and you generally say yes to most people, without looking like someone that someone would take advantage of, right? There's that line between, yes, I'm a female, I'm polite, I'm appropriate, I'm friendly, I will always compliment people, I will always thank them, I will always be as socially appropriate as humanly possible. Yet at the same time, sometimes you have to tell people that they're full of shit, and you have to do it in a way that you're not really
In the
pissing
nicest
anybody
possible
off,
way.
but you're still getting the message across, right? So there's a sort of this personality that I think we women sort of develop, and it takes time to do that. You probably have
So
exactly
it's
the same
like the boundary
personality.
setting as well, it sounds like.
Say that again.
It's also around boundary setting.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. I mean, we met, you were wonderful. We chatted, blah, blah, blah. I don't know who you are. You don't know who I am. And we ended up, it's fantastic. On the other hand, a man would have done the same thing, and he would have been horribly insulting, and I would have smiled and nodded. Then I would have politely declined his interview, right? Because that's what we do.
So tell me about some habits though, aside from that, like what are some habits that are really underpinning your success? Like yeah, like are there any things you do every day, or do
Well,
you before?
I have a few goofy things that I do.
Okay.
So number
I love
one,
goofy.
so number one, I always do something positive for myself every day.
I love that. Give me an example.
Whatever it is. It can be I went to the gym, or I buffed my face, or I read a book chapter, or whatever it is. There has to be something very specific that I can cite for myself every day. Right?
Okay. I love it.
So that's something I do. And I exercise every day.
Okay.
From hell or high water, it's what I do. It could
And
be
what do you do for exercise?
It could be a swim, it could be a run, it could be a bike, it could be a rock climbing session. I have this silly catalyst suit that sort of like fries your body for 20 minutes while you're exercising, if I'm short of time. And it's a horrifyingly crazy thing to do. So if anyone's out there listening, you have to try it to get it.
So it makes you extra hot, like extra sweaty?
No, it's an EMS suit. It's sort of like a TENS unit, but it's all over your body.
So you're being electrocuted the entire time?
Yes. Yes.
I'd love to see a picture of that.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, there's lots of different brands out there. I bought something, it's just called a Catalyst, and you look like Laura Croft, right? So you feel sort of tough, and you can conquer the world. And then as you're moving around, it goes, bzzz, right? But it's astoundingly ridiculous, but at the same time, you sort of feel powerful when you get through it, right? So it counts on my list of positive things I have done for myself.
Yeah, okay. That's a little bit dubious, but I'll let that one go. Okay. And anything else? Any other power habits?
So I have 3 lists. There's what do I have to do today, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is make phone calls, send emails, whatever it is. What do I have to do within the week? And then what are my long-term goals? And
I love that. That's like kind of like David Allen's getting things done today, soon, and someday maybe.
Yeah, I guess so, right? And I am famous for having these pieces of paper because I'm old-fashioned. I have papers with squares, right? Task square, task square. And there's 3 pieces of paper on my desk. Yeah. Today, this week, within the year. And you chip away at them all. And then as the days go by, you accomplish a ton without really killing yourself.
You know what? That's a real power habit, because a lot of people get so overwhelmed. That's like one of the things that I teach my clients as well is just to have the today list. Because if you're looking at like, gotta organize mom's 80th birthday, gotta renovate the kitchen, and like, it's all on the same list, it's just so overwhelming. You just want the things today, and then you have the soon things, which you can keep feeding on once that today stuff is finished. But then you also have to have a capture method, because people, like, oh God, I've got to remember her birthday. So they don't want to put it on their today list, but you have to have someplace to capture it. And that's, I love that. That's one of your habits. Yeah. Cool. Now let's get on to you and your book, The Kaufmann Protocol, Why We Age and How to Stop It. Okay. So tell me, yes.
I was just laughing, like where even to start? I'm waiting for the
Well, no, okay. Well, I just, okay. I don't want you to take too much time with this, because I want you to save most of the time for the 7 tenets. But tell me briefly, like, you're anesthesiologist, and all of a sudden you are writing a longevity protocol. Like, how did that come about? Just very briefly, and then let's go into the 7 tenets in the Kaufmann Protocol.
Sure. So, I hit the ripe old age of, well, let me back up. When I was younger, I have actually a master's degree in plant physiology and tropical ecology. So I love and adore cells. And I would have stayed in that, but as my father pointed out, cells don't pay bills. So in order to make a living, I went to med school. But I love cells. So I found myself hanging off a cliff, in my mid 40s, thinking
Literally?
no, literally, because I'm a rock
Yeah,
climber.
literally.
And
Okay.
so what happens is like your partner climbs up, right, and sets the anchor, and then you climb up, and then they go up. So you spend time literally hanging off of bolted anchors on the side of a cliff, and it's kind of, I mean, at first it's kind of scary, but then you go, oh, it's kind of fun, right? And like the birds are flying by, and you're just hanging there with like ropes and stuff. So there's a lot of time to think, and it dawned on me at some point that unless I figure out like how to stop aging, all of my fun was going to come to a shattering halt. And I felt old at 45. I really did. And I thought, and this was a while back. There was not a whole lot of longevity stuff out there. There's some like random crap. And if you picked up a magazine, it had some like kind of bullshit suggestions. So I thought, I am going to figure this out, which seemed like bold and ridiculous, but it falls into the pile of what could possibly go wrong, right? So I sat there when I was on call or when my kids were doing their homework. I did my homework and I read through a billion articles and determined from a cellular perspective that we actually kind of do know why you age. And then I set out to determine how to decelerate, if not reverse, all of those reasons. So I started living this and breathing this and looking younger and younger and younger. And everyone at the hospital would stop by my office and be like, all right, you got to spell it. Like, what are you doing?
Spill the beans. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me have a little bit of what she's having.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And
okay.
Publicly, they'd be like, oh, she's full of shit. We don't believe her. Privately, they would sneak into my office and they're like, you got to tell us. And I said it so many times. I'm like, I got to write it down. So I wrote a book.
Okay. 7 tenets.
Okay. So
in 7, how they have those books, Quantum Physics for Dummies, Building Confidence for Dummies. Can we do 7 tenets for dummies like me? So I can.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Cool.
And in fact, you'll appreciate this. I had to explain AP biology to my daughter, who's a senior in high school. And so I was explaining this, and she's like, Mom, she said exactly what you said. Explain it for dummies. So now she and I are writing a new book to explain this for dummies. So give me a year and it'll be available. It's going to take me a little while. Yes. That's unlike the year list, but we're working on it.
Okay. Okay. All right.
So the 7 tenets of aging are roughly kind of close to the hallmarks of aging, but I think mine are better organized. So tenet 1 is bad things that happen to your DNA over the course of time. So that is telomere shortening, which are the ends that get shorter and shorter as you get older. Epigenetic modification, which tells your DNA what proteins to make or not make over the course of time. And you can affect that with your diet. And then the structure.
And our lifestyle, our stress, all of that, right?
All of that. I
remember Dr. Deepak Chopra and Rudolph Tanzi's book, Super Genes. And I think he said something along the lines of the fact that only 10% of our genes are non-determinant, meaning like you'll definitely get the disease. The other 90% were determined, like you said, by lifestyle, diet, that sort of thing. Okay.
Yeah. Cool. So epigenetics explains why 2 identical twins look less and less identical as they get older.
Okay.
Because their diets, their environment, their habits are all different. So like they just sort of diverge with what proteins are expressing.
Okay.
So that's epigenetics. And then DNA structurally sort of starts falling apart over time, which is unfortunate. Good news is you can.
Okay, so that's the first tenet.
So that's tenet 1.
Is it the tenet of aging, really?
So yeah, they're tenets of cellular aging, because you can argue that there are things outside of your own cells. You can talk about your microbiome, which are the bugs in your gut or on your skin. This is your cells. This is your set of cells that go awry over time.
Okay.
Right. So that is tenet 1. Tenet 2 has to do with mitochondria. We all know from the 5th grade, mitochondria are where your energy is, the powerhouse of your cell, right? Energy comes from. Turns out the mitochondria do many other things. And it also turns out that they go probably wrong in 6 to 7 categories. A lot of them are easy to fix, and some of them are a little bit more challenging to fix. But it's very, very important to have your mitochondria and your energy source sort of like up and perky, right? A lot of women by the time you're 40 say, I'm tired. I can't go to work all day and come home and go to the gym and take care of the kids and blah, 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 blah. Turns out that's fixable, which is remarkable, right? So that's mitochondria. 3 is what I call pathways. These are genes that turn into proteins that control your metabolism. So you have 7 mammalian sirtuins. People are like, what the hell is a sirtuin? Sirtuins are histone deacetylases, but they essentially serve as on-off switches of all of cellular homeostasis, which means like keeping your cells like doing the right thing at the right time. By the time you are 40, depending on the sirtuin, they stop functioning. So you are going to lose cellular balance by the time you hit your mid-40s. It's
Yay.
fixable. Yahoo! Which is why, right? Your energy is down and your sirtuins are down, which is why women start going into menopause, right?
Right.
Good news is that's kind of fixable. Not
Okay.
entirely, but a lot. Significantly.
Okay. All right.
All right. So in the same category, there's something called the AMP kinase pathway, which tells your body if you have energy or not. And if you don't have energy, it puts you in a state of hibernation, which is actually very good for longevity. And this is one of the big reasons that caloric restriction works, right? Fewer calories come in, your body registers that as a shortage of energy, and it says, aha, we have to shut down a lot of processes, and your body essentially hibernates, and then you live longer. So that's kind of cool.
Is that related to autophagy or hormesis? Is that?
No, we're getting there. We're getting there.
All right.
Okay. So that's 3. 4, category 4 is what I call quality control. So things go wrong in your cells, right? So as a consequence, you have repair mechanisms. So you have 4 very specific DNA repair mechanisms. And that is important because every cell, every day, has 10 to the 4th DNA errors.
That's a lot of errors.
That's a lot, right? 10 to the 4th, sometimes to the 5th, depending if you get older. You have to fix each and every one of those errors or you're going to get cancer, right? So we have the repair mechanisms. They fail in your mid-40s.
I thought I had a lot to do. Okay.
Right? I mean, your bodies are very busy, right?
Yeah.
Proteostasis, or your protein mechanisms to keep them in line, are extraordinarily important. And you have a whole system to keep your proteins doing what they are supposed to be doing. And of course, that fails over time, but we can fix that. And then you asked about autophagy. I put that in this category. And the reason I do that is it's part of quality control. If a piece of your cell, be it a protein or an organelle or something, isn't working, your cell is smart. It just puts it in the corner, dissolves it, takes the pieces and parts apart, and then reuses them. And that's essentially autophagy. So it's a recycling mechanism to keep your cell as healthy as possible. And of course, autophagy
that process is happening when we're sleeping or fasting, right?
So what's interesting is, right, so AMP kinase activates autophagy because it says, I don't have a lot of excess energy. Let's reuse the energy that I've stored in this piece. Right. So that does, it accelerates it. Right. You can also do it with foods and biochemicals and that sort of stuff, too. Very important. But yes, you can absolutely change it with diet. That's 4. 5 is your immune system that fails over time and becomes your inflammatory system. By the time we are in our 50s, we are inflamed from head to toe. This is why when you go to your doctor's office, they always measure your CRP or your HSCRP.
Yeah.
Right. And the more inflamed you are, the higher that is and the worse it is for you, because many diseases with aging have significant components of inflammation. Right. So that's something we absolutely have to deal with. 6 is what I call individual cell requirements. Every other category, I like to pretend that all cells are the same. But in this particular one, we go, you know what? They really aren't. What do the individual cells need? So this is where we need to be really good to our stem cells, because our stem cells are going to replicate and we need them like as long as we're going to be alive.
And the stem cells are the cells that can become anything. So it can be a liver cell, or those are our ones.
Right. There are levels. There's like pluripotent and totipotent and stem cells. And depending on where you are, they can differentiate, become different cells. And it turns out most of our tissues have stem cells. There's stem cells in your fat. There's stem cells in your heart. There's stem cells like all over the place.
Your bone marrow, right?
Absolutely. Bone marrows are the big ones, right? Because you have them. And depending on how you want to look at them, you can sort of force them to do different things. But the key is making them as healthy as humanly possible, right? They live in niches, which are little environments, and you can change the environment to maximize the lifespan of your stem cells. So that's kind of cool.
Okay, good.
All right. The opposite of that is senescent cells. A senescent cell is a bad cell, and we want to get rid of them.
Yeah.
So if you take a normal cell and it has damage that you can't fix, so all that DNA damage that we talked about, it makes this cell, first the cell goes, I'm really damaged. It shuts down and goes into something called quiescence, tries to fix itself. And if it can't, three things happen. Either it just decides to politely die, which is apoptosis, become cancerous, which is evil, or it becomes senescent and it just sits there. It changes its morphology a bit and it exudes like these negative cytokinins.
It's kind of like a zombie. Is that what they call zombie cells?
It's a zombie cell. I call them grumpy old man cells. Right? Because zombies are like, right? Grumpy old man cells they like change morphology in that they're fat and they're crappy and they're grumpy and they just sit there and they, say very negative things about everything. And it's contagious. So that if there's a normal cell next to it in a paracrine fashion, the normal cell then becomes senescent as well. So it's the one.
Oh, right. So it's like
one bad apple thing, right?
Like, yeah. Okay. All right. So we have to get rid of these. I'm sure you're going to talk about that in just a bit. So are we still on number 6?
So we're on 6. So the other thing in this category is the recognition that a brain cell needs something than a bone cell versus a liver cell, et cetera. Anyway, so that's individual cell requirements. And then the last category, 7, is what I call waste management. This is mostly glycation because glucose and all of the related reducing sugars are rather evil. And they cause something called advanced glycation end products. So the glucose bonds to something and just completely destroys it for the most part, causes inflammatory issues, destruction of tissues, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, so that'll basically do you in the long run. And then there's the accumulation of lipofuscin, which is waste in your cell that your cell doesn't know what to do with. So for long-lived cells that don't really divide, it just keeps putting like garbage in the back of the cell. I call it the kitchen drawer phenomenon, right? The longer you have that cell, you just keep shoving crap in the drawer. Right? So the longer you've been in a house, the worse your kitchen drawer is. And it's the same with the cell. So if your cells are long-lived, you get lipofuscin accumulation, and then the cell can't really work. Anyway, so soup to nuts, those are the 7 tenets of aging, which sounds very depressing, and I apologize.
Well, I know we're running out of time, but what are some quick and easy ways women can start implementing or doing something about these 7 tenets? Your protocol.
Perfect question.
Like a couple of, like something that someone could do like today or tomorrow.
Okay.
Or like,
so the easiest, so what's interesting is exercise hits all of the 7 tenets. This is amazing, right? Now there's a difference between resistance training and aerobic training. So if you really want to like implement it today, run to the gym, lift some weights and run home. And you just scored in every category. So that's amazing, right?
Awesome.
Then the other thing you can do is don't eat the junk food in your kitchen. Like try to eat something slightly healthy and that's a good thing, right? And then you can't do it today, but tomorrow perhaps, I recommend something called the panacea, which is the top 5 agents to start consuming that basically can hit all of the tenets, biggest bang for your buck. Like I take 70 things a day and it's a bit much to ask.
The panacea, what is this panacea? Is that a brand name? What is this?
So the panacea is a combination of 5 agents. I've started making it as a one pill, but I haven't sold it yet, but I will eventually. But at the moment, it's just you have to sort of buy them individually. But people always say, like, if I could just have to pick like 5 things, what should I do?
All right, what are these 5
I made
things?
A list.
I'm taking notes. What are the 5 things?
So the first one, so it's easy. Panacea spells it out, which is why it's called the panacea. P stands for pterodactyl.
Okay. Oh yeah. Right? Okay. P-T-E-R-O.
P-T-E-R-O, stilbene, S-T-I-L-B-E-N-E. It's related to resveratrol, and you can use one or the other. But the key thing about them is that they're the strongest sirtuin activators that we know of at the moment, right? So we talked about that.
You mentioned the sirtuins earlier. These switches.
Yeah.
Okay.
The PA. A stands for astaxanthin. Astaxanthin is one of the strongest free radical scavengers we have. It is completely natural. It comes from algae. There are 0 side effects. It gets rid of
brown spots too, doesn't it?
It doesn't necessarily get rid of them. It diminishes more of them coming. It will make your skin significantly better. It helps your skin. It helps your vision. Helps your insides as much as your outsides. But people love it because it does help your skin.
Okay. And?
So N is a NAD precursor. So you need NAD for 4 very important things in your cell, and it's 3 different categories in the tenants. And in terms of what to take, it's either nicotinamide riboside or nicotinamide mononucleotide. And depending on what expert you have, they'll tell you one is better than the other, but I think it's garbage. I think they're pretty equivalent.
Okay.
You can also get a nasal spray or a patch. Some people do IV, some people do IM. It doesn't really matter. But after the age of 40, you need nicotinamide.
Okay. Let's quickly get those other ones.
All right. Carnosine.
Carnosine.
It's a glycosylator. It's a dipeptide. Good for basically getting rid of glucose, and you don't burn when you go to the gym. And then the last one is curcumin. You need a bioactive variety because the regular stuff doesn't really do a whole lot. But it's probably the most potent anti-inflammatory we have. So if you put those 5 things together, you hit all of the tenants, and then within 10 days to 2 weeks, people feel way better.
Awesome. I love that. So 2 final quick questions. You're mentoring the 20-year-old version of yourself. What advice would you give to her?
Stay out of the sun. Wear more sunscreen. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, we didn't know it. As a 20-year-old, I was at University of Miami lying out with BB oil on me. So that was.
Oh, I remember it. Oh, with the tin foil as well.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. That's my generation.
Bad idea.
Okay. So, okay. Stay out of the sun.
That was one. And the second thing, I think I would have shot higher earlier. I didn't have a lot of belief in myself, and I didn't know what I could accomplish.
Yes, I like that. I like that. Yeah, really go for it. Early on, like people, there's some sort of statistic that women don't even go for promotions until they feel like they have 100% of the criteria, where men, they're like, yeah, I got 30, 40. I'm going for it. You know?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And I try to instill it in my teenage kids now. They're like, I'm not sure if I can. Do it. Just try, right? Again, it's back to the phrase, what could possibly go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong? So what is next for Sandra Kaufmann?
So my plan is to leave the world of anesthesia entirely. I'm opening up a longevity clinic in Miami, probably in February or March, because I have clients from around the globe. They want to come to a brick and mortar. I do everything by video right now. There are just so many amazing therapies. You know, I'm sort of like the queen of supplements, but there's so many things you can do. I'm a big believer in exosome therapy and light therapy and all these other kind of cool things. And people have asked me to do it.
And you're going to have it all in Miami.
It's going to all be
in Miami. Gosh, one-stop shop. How amazing. I love that. Well, we'll have to circle back when you open that up.
You need to come and do a podcast from the place. That'd be fantastic.
So this is where people can go to kind of keep up to date when it's opening, where they can find you, they can reach out.
Yep. My email is on that website. So if anyone wants to ask me any questions, I answer everything myself. Sometimes it takes me a bit of time to do so, but if anyone wants to ask a question, I'm always available.
That is amazing. Now, Sandra, that was really a power half hour. You have dropped a number of pearls, and I really appreciate you taking the time. That was amazing. Thank you so much.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here.
All right. We'll speak soon. Bye.
Sounds good.